what comes out of this shame, this mask wearing, this people pleasing is such a common problem for most people with complex trauma, and that is they don't know who they are. I have had so many clients say to me, Tim, I'm 50 years old. I don't have a clue who I am. I have spent all my life fawning, wearing masks, adopting roles, being a chameleon. I don't have a clue who I am. So that is a huge challenge for people in recovery. So let me just take that characteristic and kind of go to, what do I do about it? What's the path forward in recovery to get to know who I am? Because that's really what we want to come out of these, understanding these characteristics is, yeah, that's an issue to be 50 years old and don't have a clue who you are. How do I change that? So what I want you to think about is this. The child who's in complex trauma, they're wearing masks, they're fawning, but more than that, they're in survival mode. And when a child's in survival mode, the focus of their brain is surviving. It's not exploring. It's not having fun. It's not going, oh, I wonder what I like. It's, how do I not get hurt? How do I get my needs met? So when it comes to the other thing for many children in complex trauma is they were expected to conform to being the hero child, being the invisible child, being on a path to becoming a doctor or a lawyer, to kind of fit the roles that and jobs that the parents had decided the child should have. So if they decided to pursue their interests or their passions, they got shut down for that. They got criticized for that, shamed for that. So they weren't allowed to explore. They weren't allowed to pursue their passions on top of having to fawn and be a chameleon. So how does a child normally, in a safe, healthy environment, get to know who they are? And so this is so important to understand in recovery. You first have to have safe people who aren't going to judge you, a safe environment. What does a child do in that safe environment? They play. They explore. They're curious. And they try hundreds of different things, all kinds of sports, all kinds of hobbies, all kinds of different interests. One day they want to be a doctor. One day they want to be a fireman. One day they want to be a hockey player. They are trying all kinds of different things. As they do that, without fear of judgment, they don't even see failure as a problem. That's just part of all of this. They get to realize what I'm good at, what my talents are, what my skills are, what connects to my deepest passions, what connects to a life purpose that I want, that I didn't even know I had. And out of that, they begin to know who they are. But think about that. That can take 20 years. So if you come into recovery and you don't have a clue who you are, don't expect that you're going to figure it out in a week or a month. Give yourself lots of time to figure it out. But then, with safe people and a safe, non-judgmental environment, begin to explore all kinds of hobbies, all kinds of interests. Find out what you're good at. Find out what your passion is. So most people, after they go through our program, they begin to have a vague sense of who their authentic self is. It's kind of a fuzzy, blurry image, but they're starting to get a vague sense. Over the next years, they begin to try different things. They volunteer in different places. They try different hobbies. And they get a clearer and clearer picture. One of the things that helps many people is they can take a personality test. They start to read different books that help people understand some of their desires, some of their talents, and they begin to get a clearer and clearer picture of who they are. So don't beat yourself up that you might be 50 and don't know yourself. Just go, okay, this is where I'm at. Now I'm going to give myself permission to be a child and to begin to explore and to begin to try all kinds of different hobbies. Now, for a lot of people, this triggers another part of complex trauma, which we're going to get to later, and that is fear of failure. So they start a new hobby and they go, I need to do it perfectly the first time, but they can't. They're uncoordinated. They make mistakes. It's kind of awkward. And they go, oh, I quit. No, get through that. Get past that fear of failure. It takes time to learn, and that's a gradual process where things aren't perfect the first time. Then you start to get a clearer picture of who you are. And once you do, that clarifying sense of self-identity as your shame is also healing is so wonderful. Something inside changes. Something inside feels lighter. There's a light there now that wasn't there before. Okay, let's go to the next characteristic that comes out of shame. And that is, people with shame tend to judge themselves harshly. They tend to be very hard on themselves. So if you were to get inside their brain on any given day, you would hear hundreds of messages in their brain that are criticizing everything they do, that are putting themselves down in every situation. And if they fail, then they beat themselves up royally. Part of that is a belief that that's how you motivate somebody to improve, is you put them down. That comes out of their parenting. Also, part of that comes out of, if I fail, then I need to serve the time. Justice needs to be done. I need to be punished for my crime, and I can't be let out of jail till I've served the time, which is I got to beat myself down for a couple days. So if we go back to our diagram, what you have with you hide the true self, you create these personas, then you have this internal critic. Now, the internal critic is actually doing two things. He is criticizing everything that you do because it doesn't match the ideal self. Oh, you could be better. You could have done that better if only you had like this. So it's constantly comparing the persona to the ideal self and constant failure. So constant criticism. But it's also being critical by saying you're fake. This is a false persona. This is not the true you. You have imposter syndrome. If people knew the true you, they would never love you. And so this internal critic has constant fodder to feed the mill that basically says you're phony and everything you do is never good enough. And so this internal critic for most people with complex trauma is very loud, it's very constant, and it just constantly feeds shame. It constantly makes them feel even worse. It constantly seems to confirm that negative identity that they aren't good enough. And so it becomes this loop that just feeds off itself. Now let me take you back to where some of this began. So what happens for many children in complex trauma is they have parents who neglect them or they're critical. They abuse them, they're negative, they find fault, whatever the child does doesn't seem to be good enough. They're constantly sending verbal and non-verbal negative messages to the child. So what is happening in the child's brain is they're absorbing those messages, they're believing those messages, and they're developing an internal parent in their brain, the IP. That is basically parroting what their actual parents say and how they act toward them. That's basically shame. And so that internal parent just expresses the shame belief. But then there's another piece to this, and that is this usually happens gradually. So let me give you an example. So the child is crying, and parents get frustrated with the crying and saying, big boys don't cry. That's so weak. Go to your room and don't come out till you stop crying, or if you're going to keep crying, I'm going to punish you give you something to cry about. And so all of a sudden crying to them is such a weakness. It causes them to get hurt and punished and shamed. And so they hate that weak part of themselves, that they cry so much, that they're so sensitive. And so now they go, I hate this part of myself. Let's lock it away. Then they get told they're too fat. I hate that I'm fat. I hate my body. Then they get told that they're too angry. I hate that I'm too angry. Then they get told they're too sensitive. I hate that I'm too sensitive. So gradually, piece by piece of their personality, they develop a greater negativity towards it. So now they hate their body, they hate their personality, they hate their emotions, they hate their skills, and they're trying to hide more and more of themselves and replace it with a mask that they think will gain them acceptance. But there's more and more of themselves that they don't like. So shame just has grown gradually through childhood, but also the internal parent has found more and more things to be negative about in themselves. And that is what has happened inside a child. What is so important to understand moving forward is there have been a whole bunch of tests that have been done to basically figure out what is it that is the best long-lasting motivation that brings about long-lasting change and growth in people. For people from complex trauma, they thought it would be critical, shame the person. And what they found is that brought about some short-term improvement. But if they kept getting criticized, if they kept getting shamed, after a while, it actually made things worse. The child gave up growing. They felt hopeless. What brought about long-lasting growth and healing and change? Self-compassion. What I want you to understand is what is actually needed to grow is the exact opposite remedy that shame has produced. Shame has produced shame and criticize and be hard on yourself, when the actual remedy, the actual healthy solution is be kind to yourself. To a person who's always been hard on themselves, that feels wrong. That feels weak. That feels like, how can that produce any good results? So you have to work through what feels very wrong. It feels weird. It feels awkward. It feels like you're being soft. But that is the path to healing. The next one, and that is shame basically says, I don't have value. So I don't want to feel that way. I want to feel valued. I want others to value me. So I must gain value somehow. I don't feel I have it inherently. I must earn it. I must gain it through externals. So let me show how this develops with shame. So what a child then will do is look for ways that cause them to feel they have value. So they compare themselves to others and they find kind of an arena where they seem to compete better based on kind of what culture values. So if they're very pretty and they go, wow, I'm prettier than everybody in this class, and culture values prettiness, then that's what gives me value, is my prettiness. And then if they get validated from others that, wow, you're pretty, then they go, the whole basis of my value now is my prettiness, my beauty. Or then as they develop, my body, or how good I am in bed, my ability sexually, that's what gives me value. Or my brains. I'm smarter than everybody. I get awards. I get recognized. So everything is on my ability to use my brains. That's what gives me value. Or I am very talented in sports. I'm very talented in music. I'm very talented in acting. So everybody's validating that. They're respecting me because of my talent. So my talent is what gives me value. Or my accomplishments. I am a hard worker. I can produce a lot of positive things and accomplish a lot of stuff. And people respect me for that and like me for that. So my accomplishments based on my constant hard work is what gives me value. Or if I get positions where I have power, then I have value. So I need to work towards significant positions. Or if I have lots of possessions, that must prove that I'm significant. So I need big house, big car, lots of toys. That's what's going to give me possessions. Or I'm going to be part of a culture or religion that says if you act a certain way that's proper, that's sophisticated, that's spiritual, then you're going to get respected. Then you're going to be better than everybody else. All of those, it's trying to gain value and therefore solve shame. Some people, though, go to the other extreme and they go, well, I can't compete in the brains, I can't compete in the body, I can't compete in the possessions, but I'm going to be the baddest of the bad. And that's going to get me respect from certain people. That's where my value will come from. So they're trying to solve shame by gaining all of their value through externals, since they don't feel they have anything internally. And it's all based on comparing themselves with others. But do you realize what comes out of that? What happens if a prettier girl comes to school? Now I feel insecure. Now I see that person as the enemy, as a threat. Now I must prove that I'm prettier than them. Now I must put them down somehow to reestablish that I'm superior, my dominance. Now I must always point out the flaws in others. It sets up an unsafe society. It sets up a deep insecurity and always needing to prove something all the time. The next thing that happens for a lot of children in complex trauma is they head down a direction of gaining value based on the first thing that their parents or relatives or friends validated about them. So if they were told they were funny, oh, you're so funny, all of a sudden they're heading down that road. And that's my sense of value. That's where it comes from. So I'm going to be the funniest around. I'm going to be funny all the time. Or if they got told you're so pretty, and that was constantly the focus every time people met them, wow, you're so pretty, then that became the focus of their life. Then other children, every time they help somebody, oh, you're such a helpful person. And then the people that they help, they go, oh, thank you so much. You're such a wonderful person. And so now their value comes from helping people. Others, you're so sacrificing. You're always giving. You never make demands. You never express your needs. You never push. You just give, give, give. Wow, you are just a saint. They go, wow, okay. Then I'm going to never have needs. I'm just going to give and sacrifice constantly because that's what gives me my value. Or others all of a sudden seem to realize that they gained value every time they were sick. So mom and dad neglected them normally, but when they were sick or they had a problem, mom and dad came rushing in, gave them all kinds of attention. All of a sudden they were super valuable. So if they're in pain, if they're sick, if they're in need, that's the way to gain value. Many, as soon as they got a job, then they got status, they got money, they got recognition. People noticed them. So their whole value came from their career. Problem is, when they lose their career, when they retire, then who am I? Where does my value come from? So what comes out of all of these things, what I'm wanting you to see is, in a healthy home, a child is able to be a human being. Their value comes from just being. It's inherent. Complex trauma, you have to become a human doer. All your value comes from externals, by you doing something. That is the wrong way to approach value, but that is what they think is their only option. Let me add a couple others. Some people lived with shame for so long, and then they become a parent. And all of a sudden, they have a little life that adores them, a little life that wants them, a little life that they feel such love for. They realize this child is totally dependent on them, and that gives them a sense of value. And so the solution in their brain is, I need to be a parent. I always have to have my child dependent on me. I need to create a relationship with my child where they're not actually allowed to grow up and become independent of me. They always need to depend on me in some way. And then others, they just go, I need validation. I need others to notice me. That will give me a sense of some value. So they begin to pursue the spotlight, to try to get others to notice them. They begin to tell sensational stories. Whenever anybody shares something with them, they share a one-up story to try to look a little bit more impressive than everybody else. They tell you regularly about all of their accomplishments, just hoping people will go, wow, you're impressive. They're longing for value. Let me add one final one that comes out of shame, and that is they isolate and build walls. So the ultimate way to hide shame, to hide my authentic self, is to isolate. But to understand isolation, there's geographical isolation and there's internal isolation through building walls around your heart. So some people go to geographical isolation. They withdraw from people. They convince themselves that they don't need anybody, and they kind of live all by themselves, alone, self-sufficient, and really don't have relationships. So some go that route. But at most, they go to building walls around their heart. And these can be people who have tons of superficial friends. They're very sociable. They can be the life of the party. They're just constantly surrounded by people, but nobody's getting close to them. Nobody's going to get to know the real them. They're not going to reveal who they really are to anybody. They're going to let people know them to a degree, but then those people are going to bump into a wall. Those people are going to try to get to know them better, but aren't going to be able to do that. So let me take this back to develop it a little bit farther, because there's another piece that happens with this isolation. So in complex trauma, one way to understand it is the child is desperately trying to connect with mom and dad, but for some reason, they can't have secure attachment with mom and dad. Mom and dad neglect them, abuse them, they're too busy, so there's insecure attachment. The child concludes, it's my fault, so shame develops. The child then says, I must hide my authentic self. I must isolate from people because I'm bad. Anybody gets to know me is going to reject me, so I'm going to prevent that from happening by just isolating from people. That's going to be the best way to hide. But what then is happening inside the child because of shame is, I don't even want a relationship with myself. So it's not just about me avoiding relationships with others and isolating from them. I don't even like me. So I'm going to isolate from myself. I'm going to abandon myself. So mom and dad kind of abandoned me. That's what it felt like, because they didn't want to connect with me. So if they didn't want to connect with me and abandon me, well, I'm going to abandon myself. And so there's this self-abandonment that begins to happen. And as a result of that, there's a deep loneliness that sets in, a deep feeling of not belonging, of not fitting in. So these people can be in a crowd where everybody's laughing at their stories, but they don't feel they belong. They feel very alone. And what happens for so many people with that is it leads to addiction. There's such a deep emptiness, a deep loneliness. They have to medicate it. They have to try to fill it with something that makes them feel a little bit better. And so it leads to addiction, but it leads to, for many, to deep depression, to mental health issues. Because they've abandoned themselves, there's a deep, deep loneliness. So what I want you to see is this isolation, this deep loneliness is really about deep shame that came out of lack of connection. The brain was trying to protect the child from getting hurt. And so what it thought was just isolate. That's the best way to protect the child. But it actually made things worse. What you have to understand is the brain was trying to protect the child from unsafe people. To continue to live in isolation is hurting you. What you are trying to protect yourself from is unsafe people. But what you need is connection with safe people. But your brain fears anybody I try to connect with, I'm going to get hurt. And what you have to fight against is I need connection. It's a key factor to my healing, to a healthy, meaningful life. I have to find safe people. It's going to get scary because I'm going to be afraid this is going to play out like it always has, but it always was unsafe people. So with safe people, it should be a different outcome. I have to trust that even though I'm feeling fear. If I stay in continued isolation, it's just going to lead me to darker and darker places. Thanks for being with us. Have a great weekend. See you next time.